I haven't done a pigment marker sketch in quite a while now, about a year. So I thought I would have a go at doing one of those and do a portrait. And I thought I would do a portrait of a France and Arsenal football club, absolute legend. This is difficult for me because I'm a hammer, so to draw an Arsenal legend kind of sticks in my throat a little bit. But it's for a friend's 40th birthday, so let's see how I get on.
I had a few ideas for this portrait, but one of the main things was that I wanted to make sure it was accurate. So I used a grid to enlarge it from my reference photo onto my A4 piece of paper. So you can see the lines there on my reference photo, and also I just showed you the corresponding lines on the A4 piece of paper. So because he's French, I decided to color the entire picture in the colors of the French flag. So it was going to be a strip of blue, a strip of whitish grey, and a strip of red. And after I decided to do that and I did the background, I started to do the eye. And I made the decision to just use two colours per strip. So two colours for blue, two colours for the grey, white in the middle, and two colours for the red. And it was a dark and a light colour. So here you can see me blending azure and phthalo teal light, which are the pigment marker colours that I'm using. No others, just those two. So the azure does all of the nice dark bits, and then the phthalo teal light does all the kind of light blue bits. And I also used a jelly roll pen that you can see me using here to put little speckles and little bit of highlights. I put some highlights on the eye there, and also I'm putting some highlights on the skin because the reference photo I'm using of him is in a match, so he's really, really sweaty. So he's got all these little sort of like reflective little white speckles on the surface of his skin. So that's what I'm trying to do by just putting those little dotted areas in using the jelly roll white pen. But if it was a larger highlight with a much stronger kind of and bigger area of white on the face, then I just left that paper white. I didn't bother trying to put it in afterwards with the jelly roll pen. I just left it as I went along. Now you might have noticed that I rub out most of the guidelines as I go along before I start to add colour, but I also leave in quite an amount of my pencil lines as well, because what I found with pigment markers is as they work over the surface of the specially coated paper, you work it enough with the marker, it kind of blends in the pencil line, kind of rubs it out, smudges it out, and blends it in with the marker. So I never worry too much about my pencil lines that are actually on the surface of the paper, because I know I can use the pigment markers to just sort of almost erase and blend them over with the colour. And I made a conscious decision to flip between the two different nibs in order to do kind of background and the shirt and his face. So I used the chisel nib, you might have noticed, to do the background and also his shirt. But when it came to doing the areas on the face, then I decided I would use the thinner, kind of like smaller, thin, fine pen nib on the other end of the pigment marker. This was mainly so I'd have more precision when drawing the features of the face. But there was a bit of a drawback. I don't mind being honest with you about this, and that's the fact that with some of the pigment markers, how the pigment comes out of the fine nib is a different intensity to how that pigment comes out of the thick nib. So basically sometimes it looks darker on the thin nib and a lighter shade from the thick nib, and sometimes vice versa. And I found that using the grey colours for the middle, and I'm using a toner grey 2 and toner grey 4 here. So a light grey, the 2, and a toner grey 4 to be the dark one. But what I found was when I used the fine nib of the cool grey or the toner grey 4, it wasn't as dark. It was almost the same kind of shade as the toner grey 2. So what I had to do the dark areas on his face with the darker greys, you should be able to see me doing right there, was use the chisel nib, because the chisel nib seemed to be darker and what you might say was a true toner grey 4. With any twin tip marker, both the tips, the chisel tip and the fine nib or brush tip or whatever you got, are supposed to be exactly the same color. But I found it's not uncommon for them to be a slightly different intensity. And you've just got to be ready for that. Usually if you've done a little tester, you know and you're ready and you can adapt, which is of course what I had to do here. After doing the blue section first, I think I got a bit more confident with the kind of strokes of the pen and the approach that I was using for this middle grey section. So that's why it looks a little bit more precise, there's a few more strokes, it's a bit more detailed than perhaps the blue section. And I realised that I'd have to go over the blue section later on once I thought I got the picture pretty much finished, and just maybe add a little bit more clarity and a little bit more detail to some of those sections so that it would balance. I could of course just leave it exactly as it was, and let this, what is his left eye in the grey section, have more clarity, almost in a sort of Rembrandt type fashion, so that you would focus perhaps on that eye because it was the more detailed one of the picture. But no, I had no such, kind of like high art ambitions here. I was anxious to make it accurate across the board. So I knew I'd have to go and sort of add some bits to the blue section once it was finished. Now, even though I'm only working with 2 shades here, the Toner Grey 2 and the Toner Grey 4, I could achieve quite a few different layers of tone by just layering up the colors on top of each other. So a lot of that work on the face, it's different grays, but it's all done with Toner Grey 2 mainly. And that's just layering up more on top of it each time it's dried. But the thing is, they're not quite like alcohol markers and they don't layer in quite the same way. And I found that if I was fussy and overworked it, it would almost bring up the color underneath and start to blend that together with the color I was trying to put on top. So I had to be careful and quick and light. So you can see me putting red on in the background, and this was just a Winsor red, and I decided it was too bright, and so I decided to put Winsor Red Deep over the top of it and to use that as my red. So for the red section, I just used 2 colors, Portrait Pink and the Winsor Red Deep. And just using a light and a dark color allowed me to get really good range of different pinky kind of colors, and also the blues and the grays across the entire face. And it was a good way of working, because I knew it would give me quite strong kind of contrasts, but also, a nice layer of bright colors, as you can see me doing all of these kind of like fine bits of work on the ear. Also, using colors to blend other colors in was going to keep them nice and bright and vibrant. If I'd started using the white blender pen to blend these colors together, it would give it a slightly more kind of like opaque, pale kind of sheen, because of course you're using the white blender all of the time to try and blend those colors together. And this is what I've learned with the pigment markers. If you want to keep those colors, lovely and strong and vibrant, then blend light colors and dark colors together to try and make them go dark to light. Maybe leave the white blender pen on the table untouched. And it's at this point when I'm doing the picture, and it's over 2/3 the way through, that as I'm doing it, I'm starting to see little bits that I'm not so pleased with, or I don't think are so accurate. Like, I noticed at this point that perhaps I'd done the iris in his eye on the grey side, but I hadn't done that on the blue side, and that made the eyes look a little bit different. And, the fact that his beard needed to be darker, and that his teeth just didn't look right. So what I had was a little piece of paper by the side of me, and every time I noticed something that I thought I needed to tweak and that I needed to change, I just quickly write it down on that piece of paper. So I had a list of about 10 to 15 things by the time I'd finished my sort of first pass at the whole picture, that I knew I needed to go back in and to tweak and to change to make it as accurate as possible. So you can see me doing some of those bits and bobs there. You might have noticed that I make a conscious attempt when doing the shirt to make it look different to the background. The background had lots of short chisel nib strokes, and you can see those marks. So when I was doing the shirt, what I tried to do was extend and make the strokes of the pen, of the chisel nib, longer and much more flowing. Didn't always pull it off, but that's what I was trying to do, so that the shirt would look different to the way the background was done. So here you can see me just going in with the highlighter pen, trying to extend some little bits, change some little bits, make some bits darker, make some bits lighter by putting on some pigment and then dabbing it with a tissue afterwards just to try and blot it. And at this stage, I felt that the top of his head, from his eyes to the top of his head, was not long enough, and the section between his eyes down to his chin was too long. Yes, I know his mouth is open, so that was going to extend the bottom of his face more, but I just couldn't get over the fact, even though I'd used the accuracy of the grid, that from his eyes to the top of his head just was a bit too short. Having said that, though, the grid did allow me to be way more accurate. If I think I'd drawn this freehand, I don't think I would have got most of the face as proportioned or as sort of accurate and detailed looking as it is. There would have been a few sort of artistic changes between the reference photo and the actual thing. So in accuracy, I was quite pleased with how it turned out. And there you go with the two of them side by side, so you can see the reference photo versus the actual drawing that I've done. I'm very pleased with it, but even looking at it now, I can see a few things that I need to change. I need to make his earlobe a little bit lower and perhaps extend the top of that head again. But let me know what you think in the comments below, and please don't forget to subscribe and share the video, and also maybe check out some of my previous pigment marker videos like this one, completely different, a blue iris drawing, and there's quite a few others in a playlist that I will post links to below. Thank you very much for watching.